packet.
No, it's just been washed. It's just been brought in from the wash.
Where did you get it from?
I got it down at the beach during the summer. One of these little stands that sells beach.
I'm sure somebody underneath.
I just like the
Could
fact
I
that
could I
Bulldogz
bring you to
glasses.
attention, please, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very
What?
much. I know we haven't seen each other for a while. It's been a long time since the summer, but we have returned for series 2 of Bulldog Dead Air. We're not here to talk about your delightfully lovely smelling
It's a
shirts.
very nice t-shirt.
It is. Ben, if you could step a little bit closer to the microphone,
It's a
thank
very
you.
nice t-shirt.
Brilliant, lovely. Claire, how are you?
I'm very well, Merrick. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. We're going to jump straight into it. We are going to jump straight into it and talk about a significant cultural date on our British calendars.
But which date could that be?
Well, hark at my voice. Remember the 5th of November.
Gunpowder, treason, and plot.
I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
That is it. Welcome. Come with us on an auditory journey as we lead you by torchlight deep into the damp cellars below the Houses of Parliament. It's London 1605, and undoubtedly it's raining outside. In the low light of the flickering torches, we see a man moving 36 barrels of gunpowder into place under the home of the English government. You probably recognise his face, but maybe not his name. He has long dark hair and a long thin moustache. He is Guido Fawkes, and he is part of the Gunpowder Plot. If he gets caught, he'll be hung, drawn, and quartered for treason.
A horrible fate indeed.
Yes.
If you've seen the film V for Vendetta, you've probably seen... What was that noise?
That was just me opening a
It's a small
can of beer,
explosion.
yeah.
You've probably seen Guido Fawkes, or as he was previously known, Guy Fawkes. He changed his name when he came to fight for the Spanish in
Bloody
the
Spanish.
lowlands, the lowlands, alongside
The Walloons. Against the Walloons.
alongside the Spanish against the Dutch. He changed his name so he could fit in. He was Guy, and he became Guido.
Yes, we all know him from our childhood as Guy Fawkes, but
I would like to know if Claire has any knowledge of the film V for Vendetta. Claire?
Right, let me see. This is the one where Agent Smith and Queen Amidala get together to start some sort of
Dance
anarchist
club.
resolution.
Oh, okay.
Revolution, sorry.
well, you
Seriously,
can't- No, you can't doubt.
I would like to congratulate you on finding a film that I've actually seen.
Oh, there you go. She has seen it, Ben. Look at that.
I even have it on DVD.
Are you sure it's not a coaster on your coffee table?
It's in my parents' house.
Oh, okay.
I bought it back when it came out, 2006, so probably 2007 or something. I bought it.
So you're familiar with the film?
Reasonably familiar. It has
I'm
been a while
relieved.
since I've seen it.
I'm relieved and disappointed that you've seen it. Can you give us a quick summary of V for Vendetta? What happens?
What happens? Well, there's this. The protagonist is a man, played by, what's the name of the actor, Merrick?
Hugo Weaving.
Hugo Weaving, who plays Agent Smith in The Matrix. Hence my reference from earlier. And this man lives in a future, an unreal future, not one that I can't.
An unreal future. No,
I've lost what I was gonna say.
it's a dystopic,
alternative
dystopic
future.
near
If
future.
the
isn't it?
future was not our future, what would the future be?
It would be another future.
Yeah.
An unreal future.
An alternate future.
She's got grammar on the brain. I like this concept. Technically, yes, because it obviously V for Vendetta as a film came from a Frank Miller graphic novel of the 1980s, which was his personal political reaction to Margaret Thatcher. Yes, in a sense, because the film's date of the set future, which is not specific, but
Current year.
It's
current year.
Yeah, exactly. It sets itself in our past, so it's an alternate possibility. But this is a conversation for another day. Obviously,
Yeah.
what we're talking about is the
origins of the story.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
It's an Orwellian dystopian future.
this is this theme that we talk about, which is Orwellian dystopic futures. It's the idea of
Power has shifted. Entirely in favour of the government, or at least a governing body. So people live...
And people often tend to refer to it as fascism, but what we're talking about is totalitarianism or authoritarianism. And this is it. So the V for Vendetta world is about a totalitarian or authoritarian state.
The interesting thing about V for Vendetta is it's an interesting story, but that story is totally true, and this is what I think a lot of people don't realise. You do if you're British, though, because we celebrate it every year, and this is what we're here to talk about today.
So why did we get on to V for Vendetta, Ben?
Because it is used as a kind of political conduit nowadays. Is a almost Hollywood reinterpretation of a very interesting story where a group of people try to overthrow the government, and also the central character in the story, he has this image that has now become synonymous with anonymous.
Nicely done.
Nice.
Well, yeah. Let's explain for not to spoil anything, but for a reason that will become apparent if you watch the film in the future at a future date. The eponymous hero V wears a mask. And that mask is effectively an impression of Guy Fawkes.
Guido.
Guy
Gambas
Fawkes.
Fawkes.
Even down to the hat.
Yeah.
And the hat is totally impractical. It is of all the superheroes in comic and TV fiction. It is the most ridiculous costume.
Are you sure there are some really bad ones?
Can you present me with an argument of a more ridiculous superhero costume?
Have you seen Harley Quinn's real one, not the one from the film?
I haven't even seen the film.
Don't
I've
watch
got a
it.
baby.
Pretty ridiculous.
I don't get a chance to watch TV anymore.
Yeah.
It's not on TV.
Oh, is it not? Well, there
It's
you
a
go.
film.
It
It's
shows,
It's a film,
that
right?
shows,
Yeah.
cinema.
It shows how far out of touch I have become. Tell us about. We keep referring to him as Guy and Guido. Tell us a little bit about that, Ben.
Well, Guy Fawkes was born in a city in England called York, in the north of England, the original New York, and he was...
That's what they called it, wasn't it?
Yeah, they just called it York. He was a Protestant, but he converted to Catholicism because his stepfather was a Catholic, which was very rare. It was very rare because Catholicism hadn't quite caught on. People weren't really, they hadn't downloaded it yet properly. And
In England.
You can see
in England.
In England.
Well, but okay, fair enough. I'll give you that.
Enough tangenting.
But
He ran off to fight with the Spanish Catholics.
Yeah.
So
Oh no, I thought you were making some sort of oblique
No,
reference
I meant-
to Scotland, but
I meant
okay.
in England.
Yeah.
Although that's another point for another day.
Sorry, Ben. We went down tangent alley. I do apologise.
So anyway, he grew up a Catholic. He converted to Catholicism at a very
It's easy
early
for you to
age,
say.
and he ended up going to fight for the Spanish against the Dutch in the 80 Years' War. And when he went to Spain, he changed his name to fit in, because like your name's Guy and your mate's Fernando, and there's Roberto,
And
then
Juan, and
there's
Jesus.
Juan, and you're like, your name's Guy, and it's like everyone's taking the mick out of you. It's terrible. So he changed his name to Guido.
See, but I think really, if I was Guy, I would have just said, "Yeah, my name's Guy."
Guy.
Oh,
Guy.
que chulo.
Es
Tu
que
nombre
guay.
es Guy.
I was just thinking, have
Gambas.
you tried to change your name to fit in Merrick? It's quite easy for us because we have equivalents, but you don't.
I don't. There is no.
Medical.
People call me
There is no translation.
Benaki or
That
just
does. I don't
Ben?
know. I don't know if I
Benjamin.
mentioned that before, but you know, when my wife shrieks at me from the kitchen, "Benaki, Ben!" I go, "No, he's not here." But yeah, that's
Sometimes I am.
That's
I
a
sleep
joke.
under your bed.
For another day.
She doesn't know about that. So anyway, yeah, he went to fight for the Spanish.
You can't sleep under our bed. We've got like one of those things where it's like a cupboard under our bed.
I thought you were going to say we've got a
Yeah,
dog
that's
that
where I
sleeps under
sleep.
there.
No, he sleeps on the bed. Anyway,
He
please.
changed his name to Gambas Fawkes, and while he was in Spain fighting for the Spanish, he wasn't in Spain. He was in the lowlands fighting for the Spanish. He bumped into Thomas Winter, who was out there basically looking for someone to join his little band of merry men.
He was looking for people who were prepared to commit heinous acts for a holy cause.
So the plan was to kill King James I.
I just for the benefit of our listeners in Scotland, that's King James VI.
We had more Jameses.
Do you want to explain that to Ben and the people back home as to what goes on there?
Nobody cares about
No.
the
Not
Scottish Jameses.
particularly.
King James was also known as Protestant King James, which is why they targeted him.
But he
because they
was
wanted
the
to change.
sixth James who had the
Yes.
throne of Scotland.
It is a very common name in Scotland.
He was the first James,
Jimmy.
first
Okay.
James of England, the first Jimmy of England, and they wanted to replace him with his daughter Elizabeth, Princess Elizabeth, because she was so young that they'd already selected the people they could use as their puppet government, and basically introduce Catholicism into England and Britain.
Britain didn't exist back then.
It didn't, but
This is very true.
if they had introduced Catholicism, inevitably it would have spread into Britain.
I'm sure that's true.
Do you agree?
Although, perhaps if they had done that, maybe Britain wouldn't exist.
That's absolutely true.
It's important in history that if you ask these questions, you're prepared to give full and frank answers. I do agree. So what was this plot, Ben?
Okay, well, basically, Guy Fawkes or Guido Fawkes or Gambas Fawkes, whatever you want to call him, he was taken back to England and introduced to a group of men that were making this plot of treason to kill King James I and most of the government. And he was put in charge of putting the barrels of gunpowder below the Houses of Parliament.
So let's just explain here for a second that the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster as we know it, it's not actually the same building. It's an earlier building.
It's not, no.
But we're talking about something similar to a Victorian railway station in a sense. You have the business stuff on the ground floor and above, but in the cellar... You have these arches, almost like a church or a cathedral. You have this area where it's crypt almost.
Yeah.
And what the Houses of Parliament did was they rented this space out for business storage.
Yep. And they rented one of these spaces.
Like a locale.
It's an area of London, below London, that was never really visited. I mean, why would anyone go there? It's used for storing things. It's full of rats. It's horrible. It's dark. So it's the ideal place to store 36 barrels of gunpowder
And
if you're going
also it being right directly underneath the House of Lords.
directly underneath. It was almost ingenious plot. I mean, they had such an amazing opportunity to explode Parliament.
It's astonishing. Yeah, the plan. Apparently, 36 barrels of gunpowder is equivalent to. I think it's 2,500 kilograms of modern-day explosive. The blast, the explosion, if it had gone off, would have covered approximately 490 meters as a radius.
It would have made the whole building collapse into a crater.
And there's arguments, and people seem to believe that there would have been significant damage as far up as Whitehall, towards as now what we would see as Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, it may be. I mean,
it would have been an impressive display.
If it had happened, I mean, it would have affected the bridges as well, possibly.
Yeah.
So they
let alone geopolitical situations.
Exactly. So they they made this plot, and unfortunately for them, one of the members of the party, one of the members of the plotters.
Can I point out here on the running order for the show? You have written one of the Potters.
Yes, I
I know.
as well.
I know.
Is that Harry's mum or Harry's dad? I'm not quite sure.
No,
I was thinking more of Ghost.
It was
than-
just a guy that
I was
makes
thinking.
pots.
I was thinking of the potting shed.
I was thinking Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore.
So anyway, one of these guys that
How easily we're distracted.
obviously, maybe he makes pots in his in his spare time. I don't know. We never will. He had a relative that was in the Houses of Parliament. I can't remember which person it is. You can look it up if you want. But anyway, he sent him a note to warn him not to go to Parliament.
It's a
that
bit
day.
like, if you take it the modern equivalent, it's a bit like sending a WhatsApp to your mate.
He said, "Oh, by
going,
the way,
don't go to that
don't-
party.
Yeah, because
It's going to kick off."
I might actually be blowing that up later on today. So just don't bother.
Just don't go to work today.
Yeah, don't do that. And
If you want to see tomorrow, don't go to the party.
his relative showed it to the authorities, and they didn't really take it very seriously. He actually had to quarrel with them, and eventually, after he quarrelled with them, they said, "All right, okay, we'll send down a couple of guards to have a look. It's in the cellars."
These are the characters. These are the characters in this story that I'm fascinated by.
Mm.
The two dudes on patrol.
Yeah, it's more than their job's worth. They're not. Oh God, I've got to go down into the basement. It's dark.
Can
There's
you
rats
imagine?
everywhere. There's nothing
You
down
come
there.
to the team meeting in the
Oh,
afternoon.
Gary, John.
Gary, John, do you want to pop down the cellars and have a look around?
Oh,
Oh,
what?
really? No.
Why me?
Well, I've always
What-
got.
what?
Oh
Done?
Christ!
Don't question my bloody authority, Gary. Just get down there and have a look for mysterious people doing
And
dodgy
that's
things.
why every year on the 5th of November,
5th of November,
we celebrate Gary and John Day, and God bless Gary and John for finding
Their
Guy
diligence, walking around in those
Fawkes.
little.
We will never forget them. We will never
even though
forget
no one knows their names.
them. Could have been Gary or John.
It could have been.
Anyway, these
dudes,
they found Guy Fawkes picking his nose in front of these 36 barrels of gunpowder.
You can imagine him. He's just rolled a big joint and he's sat there going, "Tomorrow it's gonna go bang."
On the
It's all gonna
5th
kick
of
off.
November,
Yeah.
they found him, and he was taken to
There probably
the
would
tower.
have been a little bit of a stare off for a few seconds.
No, well, there was a ruckus.
Invariably, like a 1600s equivalent of what you did.
They apparently they fought him. He was they had a bit of a swordy fisticuffs with swords, and anyway, they took him to the Tower of London, which is
Not a nice place to go.
At the time.
unless you're 20th century
Now it's
tourist.
great. It's a tourist attraction. You go there, you can see all these plasticine men being tortured. It's brilliant. But back then, the men weren't plasticine; they were real. And they got tortured in horrible ways. And the most interesting
One of the most
thing,
poignant things about this torture story of Guy Fawkes is one of the things that I always remember from school. It's the flourish, the joy, the beauty of his signature. And then you see his signature on his confession, which is 2 days later?
3 days.
3 days
They
later.
tortured him for 3
And
days.
it is clear from the way he has written his name, he is an utterly physically broken man. He has gone from this beautiful, sweeping signature to this childlike scrawl. This man's treatment would not have been allowed under modern
What? He's
legal
had
conventions.
three days of people putting vegetables up his bottom,
some
amongst other
thumb
things.
screws.
Thumb
yes,
screws also.
probably
But
extreme.
the
heat.
vegetables were bigger back then. Remember that, like a turnip that you have nowadays is you imagine that, like it's like 6 foot long.
Delightful.
1605 turnip.
So
massive.
he confesses to a total and complete crime.
Yeah, and he names the whole reason that they torture him is
co-conspirators.
he names the co-conspirators, and they round them up, and they have a trial, and obviously there's the trial.
or what's
is not a
referred to
trial.
as a show trial.
It's show trial, exactly.
I mean, but we say that, but it is interesting because the evidence is pretty damning. They are guilty, but they're not really given. I mean, it's a show trial in the sense that it's not a carrying out of law and fairness. But the fact is, I mean,
They were quite literally caught
red-handed. Yeah.
What happened
We
next?
call it a show trial because they basically they did it within the week. It was pretty brisk.
What happened next was they were sentenced to death.
If you're a child, look away now. It's going to get unpleasant.
Being hung, drawn, and quartered, which is the highest sentence for an act of treason.
Can we ask Claire to explain to the listeners
She's going to explain what that means.
What that means.
What, hung, drawn, and quartered?
Hung, drawn, and quartered. Yes.
So, first of all, it's actually quite literal. Hang on, are they hung first?
Well, this is it.
This is
no,
the-
you see,
I think they're
hung,
they're
and
drawn.
Yeah.
They're drawn,
No,
hung,
sorry,
and quartered.
no. Yeah, that's correct.
The
yeah.
description I
Drawn
read
and
was
quartered.
quite graphic.
It's a quite graphic thing to occur.
That they
to be
get
fair.
their testicles cut off.
No, that was just for William Wallace. That's another story entirely.
No, this is what
No,
this
they
is what
do.
this
They
is what
do.
I read.
But also
Testicles
women
cut
as well.
Any opportunity to bring back in William Wallace.
Testicles cut off.
But hang on,
guts sliced open with the guts come out.
You're jumping the gun.
Come
this
on.
not the drawn
This
part?
is an
No,
act of
drawn is they're taken from the tower to the place of execution, and they're dragged through the streets by
Behind the cart.
behind horses. Yeah. Now, as we mentioned, the only
dragged by their
depiction-
feet, mind you.
Yeah,
So their heads hit
So
the
their
ground.
heads,
A boom,
and
boom, boom.
people are throwing things at them, you know, and in films it's depicted as
Shame.
and in films
Shame.
it's depicted as vegetables, but it's
Watch an episode of Game of Thrones
it's
and you'll get an
human.
idea.
It's human waste. It's human waste being thrown at them, and they're dragged over rough, hewn rock, stone streets and mud by their feet, so their head and their body, and they are in basically rags. Yes, I say many people suffered this fate. The only real depiction in well-known Hollywood cinema is Braveheart, and as we were making reference to it, it is woefully inaccurate as to the actual process. You know, in the film, he comes along on a pseudo crucifix on the back of a wagon. No.
But, so are the quarter after the hanging?
Yes. Tell us
Because-
about the hanging,
Because
Claire.
what I've read is that it sounded like the other way around.
So
Like
what-
he was
How
hung.
can you hang someone who's been quartered?
No, what I read is that
you can hang
they
the
were
parts of them.
they were gutted, like they were
Yes.
they were
Yeah,
slit.
yeah.
But I read that was before they were hung, so it was like a torture.
No.
Can I just interject and say before they were
Boo.
hanged?
Hanger.
Before they were hanged.
So
Hung
what happens
before they were
is
hung.
No.
they're drawn to the place of execution, and then they are hung. Not so they
Hanged.
They are hung.
They
So
were hung.
Hanged.
they are hung.
I'm with him actually.
No. They're two different verbs.
They are hung. So
I'm still with you.
not so in their next break, but just so they're thoroughly uncomfortable. So a real pain in the neck. Ow. Oh,
Well,
that's
trapdoor hanging
stiff.
didn't really get introduced till much later. Basically,
They just
people,
hang you
people
so
were
you're like,
hanged
stop it.
until they couldn't breathe. Whereas modern day hanging or modern era hanging was about breaking your neck upon a fall. So
Yep.
they were hanged repeatedly.
Yep.
Repeatedly, they were dragged up and down, and then this delightful experience of being basically quartered.
Although
First thing that happens,
would they
genitals. Say goodbye to your genitals.
And in the case of William Wallace, that whole thing in the film where he shouts freedom, he didn't do that because he had his testicles in his mouth by the point.
But you know what they did with these guys? They cooked them in front of their eyes. They cut their genitals off and then they threw them in a hot pan.
And for him, a little bit of garlic,
Wow.
A little bit of garlic, probably
some
Un-
guindilla.
a splash of Beano.
unsurprisingly, Guy Fawkes didn't find that idea very appealing.
Well, who would?
Yeah.
Apart
Not my
from
idea.
So
of
he
a
decided
night
to
out in
take
Glasgow.
some action.
So
Yes.
yeah. So this
Yeah?
is one of
What
the interesting.
happened?
One of the things that we learnt in our research for this episode is that our understanding is that Guy Fawkes was hung, hanged, drawn, and quartered, and the quartering of the into quarters of the body was then for parts of his body were then put upon gates of significant cities in the north, south, east, and west of the country. But he found he cheated the horror. What did he do, Claire?
He decided, after seeing, I believe, some of his co-conspirators suffer.
No, he was the last one.
So he'd seen the others
saw
suffer
everyone,
the
yeah.
treatment.
Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't have seen them. He
He
Or
would have heard their
heard them.
screams.
Yeah.
Because the tower was the place of execution, so
Yeah.
he would have been held in one of the towers, and he would have been able to hear what was happening, and the crowd going, "Way!" I mean, they didn't have television, so everybody loves a good hanging, don't they? Go down a hanging. Oh, they're hanging that Gambas Forks this weekend. I'll be down there
I
for
might
that.
pop down and see that.
Oh yeah, I've got a couple of rocks in my pocket.
So, Ben, if I get this right, because I'm not I just read that he jumped to his death. Was it from the gallows?
He wasn't executed. He jumped off the scaffolding and he broke his neck. Unlike his friend Thomas Winter, who tried the same thing earlier that day, and he jumped off and he just kind of grazed himself a little bit, and they picked him up and said, "No, we're going to execute you in the most horrific way possible." So he saw his untimely fate.
So the reason we talk about this is because every year in Britain we have
We celebrate. We celebrate
Bonfire night.
this weird.
So what do we do? What do we do? Explain this to the people who are not from
Well,
Britain.
it's a horrible story. It's a horrible history. And after it happened, I think the government was so shocked that they decided to remind the people every year not to don't be naughty, don't be bad, don't try and blow us up and all of that stuff.
If you try and blow us up, we're going to hang you, draw you.
And they wanted people to remember that for years to come. And the strange thing is, it's like the earliest form of marketing because it has completely worked. We celebrate every 5th of November by creating an effigy of Guy Fawkes. For some reason, he became the symbol of the whole plot, even though he was only one part of it. And we
He's the one that got away, Ben.
Well, yeah, I guess he was. Yeah, well, in a way,
that
he
sense,
was.
in
He
that
was, yeah.
sense, yeah.
He was the only one that wasn't punished in the given method.
So they have to perpetuate the punishment for all of eternity.
For the last 400 years, we have in England been making a kind of straw or a stick version of Guy Fawkes and building an enormous bonfire.
Which is a danger to hedgehogs.
Exactly. And putting him on the top and just having a huge every park, every small community, I think it's probably the only festival in England that pretty much everyone participates in. It's very strange. It brings people together. You go down the park, it's cold. It's that time of year where it's just kind of getting cold, and you've got a reason to go outside and be next to something warm, which is very kind of that attracts people.
British.
And then we have fireworks, which are supposed to represent what would have happened if he had succeeded in blowing up the Houses of Parliament.
So now these days, what used to be called Gunpowder Night or Guy Fawkes Night
Or Bonfire Night.
is now called Bonfire Night,
Night.
or
Fireworks
Night.
Night,
Is
yeah.
now the bonfires are not as common as they once were. It is much more about fireworks these days, which I think is a bit sad, because I remember as a child growing up watching those bonfires and those effigies. And those effigies these days are not always of Guy. They are of modern politicians.
Yeah, well, this
or
is the strange thing.
David Beckham.
Do you know
1 year back?
This is
back
why
in the recent past.
I think that Bonfire Night is so interesting, is because it has political roots that have been forgotten, but now seem to be returning in a modernised form. Like, we have these political figures that are being thrown onto the fire, and it's almost like the public have taken back the original sense, the original meaning of what the plot was about.
Instead of being reminded of the dangers of taking on the establishment, they are using the night to express their frustration with members of the establishment.
If you tell us what to do,
We'll throw you on the fire.
we will do the opposite. It's not really related to the festival in general, but one of my favourite Guy Fawkes Bonfire Night memories was when we went to a firework display and one of the fireworks exploded and the dead rocket came down and hit my sister square on the bonce. and she was crying.
That's
and
one
I
of
was
your
laughing.
favourite memories.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Great brother.
It was brilliant.
That was brilliant. But there you go. That is November the 5th. Remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot. If you want to understand how to maintain control over your audacious public, burn an effigy once in a while. This brings us to an end of the first episode of the second series of Bulldog Dead Air. Have you had a nice time, ladies and gentlemen?
I've had a wonderful time.
Talking about intestines and testicles being burnt over a fire.
That always gets me in the mood, actually, to be honest.
Political uprisings.
I'm up for it. I've got yet to find a place in Spain that sells sparklers, and then we'll get ourselves down the park and have our
Get
own.
arrested for having an open naked flame.
Yeah, they don't understand it over here, do they?
No, they don't.